Imagine waking up in a world that has no concept of time, no clocks, calendars, or watches, and no awareness of history, or seconds, minutes, and years. You probably wouldn't even realize anything was different. That is, until you tried to tell someone what time it was. Time is all relative anyway, isn't it? It depends on who you ask. Einstein said time is relative and depends on your frame of reference. So it follows that if our ancestors hadn't invented ways to measure and keep track of time, well, they might not have developed the rest of physics as we know it either. So let's explore an alternate universe where humans evolved without the concept of time. How would the human brain work differently? Would there be any culture or society? And would there even be any humans? If time wasn't invented, then neither would measurement systems. We are constantly measuring time by the rotation of the Earth on its axis and around the sun. This gives us days, weeks, months, and years. But our ancient ancestors didn't know about this. They would see the sun rise and set every day, and maybe notice the phases of the moon. But without the ability to track these cycles over long periods of time, they wouldn't understand that it happened again and again in a predictable pattern. This means our prehistoric ancestors probably could unbuild any kind of civilization without some sort of calendar system. No agriculture, no villages, no cities, no roads, no empires, and no wars. The reason for this is that life without measurement of time would be chaos. Imagine trying to coordinate building a project with others when you and agree on a starting point or finishing time. Even living your daily life would be difficult. You wouldn't be able to make plans because you wouldn't know how long something would take. We're so used to telling people we'll call them back in an hour, or that we'll meet up at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Without a concept of time, communication would be extremely limited. Our entire economic system depends on time. Trains run on timetables, and flights have strict departure times. If time wasn't invented, planes wouldn't take off and trains wouldn't leave the station. It would be impossible to coordinate that many people doing different jobs around the world without some universal system of tracking time. Life expectancy would also be affected. Without medical science, people wouldn't know if it was safe to eat certain foods because they wouldn't be able to track how long the food had been stored. Medicine relies heavily on tracking the passage of time. Antibiotics need to be given within a certain time frame after a person gets sick, and a fever might last only a couple of days, but a week without water could be fatal. Without any way to track the passage of time, modern medical science wouldn't exist. If you were sick, you'd have no idea whether it was safe to get up out of bed or sit in a chair. People probably wouldn't live past their 40s without antibiotics. It's hard to imagine civilization developing beyond hunter-gatherer societies. Most likely, the human race would never have advanced far enough to invent computers, smartphones, or space travel without the ability to measure time. These things required huge amounts of people working together over very long periods of time. But here's where it gets really interesting. Would humans even have evolved if time wasn't invented? Humans today are obsessed with time. It seems as though we're always rushing somewhere or waiting for something. We use time to measure our worth. We talk about how busy we are and how little time we have left. The invention of time may have caused more problems than it solved, at least according to some scientists. Many believe that time causes entropy, which is the gradual decline into disorder. This means that over time, everything moves from order to chaos. When you leave your bedroom door open, your clothes slowly start to pile up on the floor. Over billions of years, this happens on a cosmic scale. Stars explode and galaxies collide because of entropy. Without time, would entropy still exist? Some scientists think that time itself creates entropy. But if time and measurement are invented rather than intrinsic to the universe, then maybe entropy doesn't exist either. Without entropy, the universe would remain ordered and stable forever. And it might even get less chaotic as time went on. Without time, we wouldn't have seasons. We'd never get too hot or too cold. The weather would stay mild and pleasant. Your plants would grow whenever they wanted to, and there'd be no limit to the number of babies you could have. But this alternate universe is starting to sound pretty boring. Without time, there would be no history. There'd be no stories about the past or legends passed down from one generation to the next. We'd have no understanding of how our current society came to be or why we do the things we do. We wouldn't even know what caused the extinction of dinosaurs. A lot of human culture is based around storytelling. Our favorite books, movies, and songs are full of tales from long ago. In fact, our brains love stories about the past. We're fascinated by shows and documentaries about ancient civilizations, lost cities, historical figures, and battles that took place hundreds of years ago. What's going on in our brains when we hear these stories? Why do we care so much about the past? Researchers have found that hearing a story activates the same part of the brain that experiences the event being described. This means that your brain actually feels as though you're retaking part in something happening in the past. Your brain doesn't distinguish between memories and stories, because both activate the same regions of the brain. In an alternate universe where time isn't invented, stories would probably become irrelevant. Maybe humans wouldn't even have a concept of past, present, and future. Human language relies heavily on verbs which describe actions taking place in different time frames. If you couldn't count time, you would not be able to say that you wrote a book 3 years ago or that you've been eating cereal for breakfast since you were a child. Without these verbs, children probably wouldn't learn about the past from their parents, and adults would have no concept of what they did yesterday or what they will do tomorrow. Language determines the structure of our thoughts. If we can't talk about the past, then we probably can't think about it either. Some anthropologists believe that a lack of shared stories and history would lead to a lack of culture. If that were true, then without time, there probably wouldn't be any humans. At least not the type of humans that we know. Since the dawn of civilization, humans have striven to make their lives better. We've done this by building homes, growing crops, curing diseases, traveling into space, and creating works of art and music. We've accomplished all of this by planning for the future and remembering what happened in the past. Without time, we wouldn't be able to plan for the future or remember the past. Humans need time to make progress, but they also need time to reflect on that progress. We can't do either of those things without inventing some sort of timekeeping device. But what if humans somehow invented farming and built settlements without developing any way to measure time? What would these early human societies be like? Most likely, they would disintegrate as soon as contact was made with another society that kept time. If you lived in a village that didn't keep track of time, and traders arrived from a neighboring city that did keep track of time, you'd probably think that they were crazy. If they told you it was noon, and then 2 hours later they said it was 2 o'clock, you'd assume they were lying. Or maybe you'd think they come from a world where the sun moved twice as fast as it does in your world. This would apply to pretty much any human interaction. You wouldn't be able to trade or interact with other groups without knowing what time it was. You've probably noticed that there is a difference between watching a clock with hands on it and looking at a digital clock that just shows numbers. The clock with hands seems to move slower than the digital one. This is because our brains don't like abstract ideas. The hands on the analog clock represent fractions of a whole, whereas the numbers on the digital clock are just arbitrary symbols. If humans never invented an analog clock, they probably wouldn't have the ability to grasp fractions. In turn, this would affect their ability to perform math and science. We know from studying primitive tribes that humans don't need numbers to thrive. But without the concept of time, humans might not have developed the ability to count. This means that life without timekeeping devices would go back to a more primal state. Humans would be closer to animals than modern humans. Their brains would be more focused on immediate surroundings rather than abstract concepts like time. They might even develop a sixth sense to help them survive in their environment. Animals rely on senses that humans don't have. If humans never developed the concept of time, maybe they'd develop a sixth sense to compensate. Now watch. What if the Earth stopped rotating? Or check out. What if all the water on Earth disappeared?